I never thought I'd be the sister who got erased. But there I was, sitting in my apartment in Portland, Oregon, staring at a text that didn't just uninvite me from the biggest day of my sister's life. It erased me, quietly, efficiently, like I was a technical glitch in the middle of her perfect wedding spreadsheet. The message read, "Hey Brooke, after talking with Tanner and his family, we think it's best if you don't attend the wedding. There's just been too much tension. I hope you understand. Love you. Love you." It took me 10 minutes just to process those 2 words. Because love doesn't look like this. Not when you've bent over backward your whole life for a family who praised your stability, yet punished you for not being chaotic enough to notice. Let me back up. I'm Brooke Mallory, 34 years old. The older sister. The responsible one. The planner. The achiever. The one who never missed a birthday, who booked the family Airbnb for every reunion, who made everyone's flight itinerary when they couldn't figure out how to use Google. And then there's my sister Claire, 3 years younger. Magnetic, dramatic, adored. If I was the steady heartbeat in the background, she was the firecracker everyone watched burst open at family dinners, laughing, crying, stealing the moment. When we were kids in a leafy suburb just outside Denver, it felt normal. Our dad, Thomas, ran a regional chain of outdoor gear stores. Our mom, Valerie, had a home decor blog that blew up on Pinterest and eventually became a full-time gig. On the surface, we looked like a Pinterest-perfect family. But beneath it, Claire was the performance. And I was the backstage crew. At age 10, she flooded our kitchen trying to make a surprise lava cake for Mother's Day. Guess who cleaned up the mess? Me. Guess who got taken to Cold Stone for trying so hard? Her. In high school, she missed curfew so many times, Mom actually started calling it Claire time. When I brought it up just asking for fairness, Mom said, "Not everything needs to be so serious, honey. Your sister just feels things more deeply." That phrase stuck with me like a bee sting under the skin. She feels more deeply. What did I feel then? Less. By senior year, I had a 4.0 GPA, was captain of the debate team, held a part-time job at a bookstore, and still made time to design Claire's homecoming posters because she forgot again. No one clapped. No one noticed. Except my best friend from college, Melissa. We met freshman year at University of Washington School of Engineering. She came from a big blended family in Atlanta. One night, after hearing me vent about Claire blowing through another rent bailout from our parents, she said, "Brooke, your family built 2 entirely different rule books, and only you got the one with consequences." I laughed, but it hit like a truck, because it was true. I was the fallback plan, the fixer, the invisible support beam. But I loved Claire. God, I really did. Through all the mess. When her boyfriend cheated on her junior year, I flew to Santa Monica to help her move out. When she got fired from her job for showing up late too often, I stayed up all night helping her redo her resume. When she totaled her Mini Cooper and cried to our dad, I was the one who quietly wired her the down payment for a new lease. "You're a saint," she'd say, hugging me like a warm apology she never meant to keep. And I believed it, because every little thank you felt like oxygen in the slow suffocation of being forgotten. But over time, those thank yous faded. Her reliance on me never did. When Claire met Tanner, a tall, too-smooth tech investor from Palo Alto, I tried to be supportive. I really did. He was nearly 10 years older, looked like he stepped off a Patagonia catalog, and had the uncanny ability to steer every conversation toward crypto or yachts. Still, I smiled. I showed up. I listened. 4 months after they met, Claire called during my lunch break, squealing. "Brooke," he proposed, on the gondola at Lake Tahoe. "Look at this ring." It wasn't just a ring. It was a glacier with diamonds. I congratulated her, of course. But something in my gut tightened. Maybe it was the speed. Or maybe it was how Tanner answered for her at dinner. Or the way he told her, Maybe don't eat all the fries, you've got dress fitting soon. I raised it once, gently. During a wedding planning brunch over lattes and a shared Pinterest board. Are you happy? Claire? I mean, really happy. She stiffened. Her eyes darkened. Brooke, just because you're single and overthink everything doesn't mean I can't be spontaneous and in love. I bit my tongue. Again. She was still my sister. I still loved her. Weeks later, she gave me a little velvet box at Sunday dinner. Inside was a rose gold bracelet engraved with sister, best friend, maid of honor. And for a moment, I thought maybe we were okay. We weren't. As the wedding grew more extravagant, Tanner's mother, a country club matriarch named Darlene, took over everything. The winery wedding turned into a 500-guest gala at a luxury resort on the Puget Sound. My opinions were brushed off by the planner Darlene hired. Dress fittings happened without me. Shower dates were picked, changed, and finalized, and I found out after the fact. Still, I smiled. Still, I tried. Until Claire took me to brunch, flanked by Bethany, a long-lost sorority sister, who once left Claire stranded at a music festival and dropped the bomb. I think Bethany's more in line with the vision I have for the wedding. So, she'll be maid of honor. My voice cracked, but I asked, am I still in the wedding? Of course, just as a guest. That was the moment I realized I wasn't part of her story anymore. I was just a footnote she'd rather delete. And when my parents said, well, it is her big day, I knew. I wasn't just uninvited from the wedding. I was uninvited from the family. I wish I could say I confronted everyone that I stood up at dinner, delivered a searing monologue about family dynamics, and walked away with dignity and applause. But that's not what happened. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot after that brunch, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the last stable thing in my life. I didn't cry. Not right away. It was too much to process. The pain hadn't even reached the surface yet. What echoed in my head wasn't Claire's voice. It was my own silence. Years of swallowing things, of shrinking myself, of telling my therapist, it's not that bad, really. They mean well. But this time, something snapped. Not violently, not even loudly. It snapped the way a lock quietly clicks open when you finally find the right key. That night, I stared at my calendar. May 27th. Claire's wedding was in 12 days. I had taken PTO, booked hotel rooms, rearranged client meetings, and now I had nothing to show for it. No role, no place, no voice. But I still had the time off. And more importantly, I had a choice. I opened my laptop. My cursor hovered over the Flights tab. Originally, I'd planned to buy Claire a very expensive espresso machine as a wedding gift. I'd been saving for it for months. Instead, I used that money to book something else, a solo 10-day trip to a secluded eco-lodge in Costa Rica. Flights out in 3 days. Return the week after her wedding. It wasn't revenge. It was preservation. When I texted my parents to tell them I'd be gone, really gone, Mom's reply came fast. You're leaving the country. But what if Claire changes her mind? What if she needs you? That message hurt more than I expected. She uninvited me, Mom. Remember? But I didn't say that. I just wrote back. She made her choice. I'm honoring it. Dad called that evening. His voice tight, trying to sound neutral. This feels like punishment, Brooke. It's not, I said. It's the first time I've chosen peace over proximity. And I meant it. The morning of my flight, I threw a few books into a duffel powered down my phone and slid it into the deepest pocket of my suitcase. Not airplane mode. Not do not disturb. Off. No notifications. No what ifs. No slow erosion of my boundaries by group chat. The plane ride was long, a layover in Houston, a connecting flight to San Jose, and a bumpy drive up winding mountain roads to the Monteverde cloud forest. By the time I arrived at the Eco Lodge, my muscles ached and my eyes were heavy, but something inside me felt strangely alert, like I was finally walking into a room where no one had expectations of me. The lodge was exactly as promised, handcrafted bungalows built from reclaimed wood nestled into the hillside, each one with a private balcony that opened to a view of mist-draped trees and vines that glowed green even in the fading light. My bungalow had no TV, no Wi-Fi. The silence was shocking, beautiful, unfamiliar. I fell asleep that night with the window open, the jungle murmuring softly beyond the mosquito net. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept straight through until morning. No alarms, no anxiety spikes, no dreams of forgetting someone's birthday or missing a deadline. Just sleep. Real, deep, dreamless. The next morning, I woke to a sound I didn't recognize, a throaty melodic trill. A bird, I guessed, or something pretending to be one. I made my way to the open-air restaurant for breakfast. Alone, no bridesmaids, no RSVP drama, just me, a bowl of fresh papaya, and a mug of Costa Rican coffee so strong it could punch through drywall. That's when I met them, Maya and Joe. They were seated at the next table, already mid-laughter about something involving a missed zipline tour and a goat. Maya was tall with sun-bleached braids and the steady energy of someone who probably hiked volcanoes for fun. Joe wore a vintage NASA cap and spoke with a Boston accent thick enough to slice toast. They caught me smiling at their joke. "First time in Costa Rica?" Joe asked. "Is it that obvious?" Maya grinned. "You've got that freshly escaped look?" I laughed, then paused. Because she was right. I had escaped. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. They invited me to join them for a hike through a butterfly garden that afternoon. I hesitated at first. I'm not usually someone who joins strangers' adventures, but something in me, the part that used to say I really shouldn't, was quiet now. So I said yes. And as we walked beneath canopies of emerald leaves through clouds of iridescent blue butterflies, I found myself talking. Really talking. I told them everything. The demotion, the wedding, the family dynamics, Tanner, the brunch with Bethany. They listened without flinching. Joe said, "That's diabolical." Maya said, "That's not a sister. That's a PR disaster." But what got me most was what they didn't say. They didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix it. They just let it sit, let me be heard. And I realized no one back home had done that. Not really. That night, I returned to my bungalow and stood barefoot on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the clouds roll over the treetops like slow ghosts. For the first time, I whispered out loud, "Maybe I'm not broken." Maybe the system was. By my third day in Monteverde, the stillness had started to seep into me. I wasn't used to it, the quiet. At home, my life ran on structure. Email notifications, calendar reminders, Slack pings, meetings about meetings. Even my grief was scheduled. I'd cry between 9 and 10, then get back to work. But here the jungle moved on its own time. The mist didn't ask permission before rolling in. The toucans outside my balcony didn't care about Claire's guest list, and the sun rose whether I deserved it or not. That morning, I noticed something strange. I hadn't checked my phone. Not even once. It was still tucked away in the room, safe, buried beneath a scarf and my travel wallet. Every now and then, I'd feel a phantom vibration in my leg, that ghostly muscle memory of anxiety. But then I'd remember, no one can reach me. No one can demand an explanation. And no one can guilt me for walking away. The absence of obligation felt like space, and in that space, something new began to stir. I signed up for the lodge's sunrise yoga class on a whim. It wasn't something I normally did. I'd always rolled my eyes at the wellness girls on Instagram posing on mountaintops in perfect leggings. But the lodge's instructor, Kai, wasn't anything like that. He was a wiry, sun-weathered man in his 50s who wore mismatched socks and spoke in low, deliberate tones. He'd lived in Costa Rica for 20 years and said he used to be a corporate attorney in Phoenix before the weight of pretending finally broke something. Relatable. We began in silence. Mats on a wooden deck facing the valley. The air was damp, earthy sweet, like the forest was still yawning awake. Kai said, "Let the noise stay where it came from. This hour belongs to no one but you." The poses were simple child's pose, warrior, downward dog. But my body fought each one. Not from lack of flexibility, but from memory. My shoulders ached with years of tensing through other people's emergencies. My jaw tightened with all the things I never said. Kai walked past me once, gently pressing a hand between my shoulder blades. "You don't have to carry them anymore." He didn't explain who they were. He didn't need to. That evening, I joined his sunset meditation session. Just a dozen of us seated in a half circle on a wide wooden platform overlooking the treetops, the sky bleeding orange into violet. Kai's voice was soft but clear. "Tonight's focus is forgiveness, but not for them. For you. For the version of you that stayed too long, that gave too much." That thought love was earned through sacrifice. His words dropped like stones into the quiet. I sat there, eyes closed, breathing as the dusk thickened around us. Forgiveness. I didn't think I was ready for that. Not for Claire. Not for my parents. Not for Tanner. But maybe I could start with forgiving myself. For not speaking up sooner. For always being the one who fixed things. For believing that being needed was the same as being loved. The next morning, I took my journal onto the balcony. The pages were stiff from humidity, but the pen moved easily. I wrote about my childhood, about the time I skipped a friend's birthday party, because Claire needed help with a school project she forgot until the night before. About how Mom used to say, "You're the only one she listens to." That felt like a compliment when I was 10. Now I see it for what it was, a leash. A quiet contract. I wrote about the night Claire called me sobbing because her lease had fallen through. I dropped everything, found her a place through a friend, and even covered her deposit. When I told Mom, she said, "Thank God you're around. Claire would be lost without you." She wasn't wrong. But what no one asked was whether I was lost too. That evening, I walked alone through the edge of the forest trail just before dinner. The light was dim, filtered through layers of green. I heard something in the trees, not threatening, just alive. The jungle hums even when you're not listening. At a clearing, I stopped. Sat on a mossy boulder. Watched clouds swallow the ridges below. I whispered out loud to no one I deserve more than being the backup plan. It didn't feel revolutionary, but it felt true. Back at the lodge, I found Maya and Joe at the bar. They waved me over. We clinked glasses, maracuya cocktails, and guava soda, and I told them I'd signed up for the cooking class tomorrow. "Look at you," Maya teased. "From software schedules to Gallo Pinto." We laughed. But inside, something was shifting. My laughter wasn't polite. It wasn't performative. It was mine. Later that night, I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan trace lazy circles in the air, and I thought, maybe I didn't come here to escape the wedding. Maybe I came here to escape a life that always made me feel optional. I was folding a still warm towel on the railing of my bungalow when the sky shifted. It had been bright just seconds before, but suddenly, a strange hush fell over the forest. Like the jungle itself was holding its breath. I didn't know it then, but somewhere, 500 miles away, in a glass-walled hotel suite overlooking Puget Sound, Claire's picture-perfect wedding was beginning to unravel. While I was stirring passion fruit syrup into a pitcher of iced tea, She was screaming. While I was slicing plantains in a cooking class, she was pacing the carpet barefoot, mascara bleeding into her collarbone. While I was learning how to make gallo pinto from scratch, surrounded by strangers who knew nothing about the ghost of a sister, I was trying to forget my phone locked away in a wooden safe, buzzed over and over again with messages I wouldn't read for days. The wedding was falling apart, spectacularly, publicly, and I was nowhere near it. The night before the ceremony, Claire and Tanner had their final rehearsal dinner at the Four Seasons. Candlelight, champagne, linen napkins folded into roses. Everything was going fine. Until it wasn't. It started with a joke. Tanner's best man, Connor, the kind of smug finance bro who thought ironic misogyny was a personality, made a toast. Sloppy. Loud. Grinning like he just landed a TED Talk. To my guy Tanner. Remember when your crypto almost tanked in 21 and now look at you about to marry a literal goddess with money from the governor's cousin and a smile so perfect it should be illegal. Nervous laughter. Forks clinking. Someone coughed. Claire went quiet. Her eyes narrowed. What crypto crash? She asked. Tanner waved it off. Connor's an idiot. But it was too late. The damage was done. That night back in their suite, Claire demanded answers. At first, Tanner gaslit her, called her insecure, accused her of ruining the night. He said things like, "Why are you always looking for reasons to doubt me? You're just scared because it's finally real." But then his phone buzzed. Claire saw the name Sterling and Associates, and something in her broke wide open. She grabbed the phone. The texts were bad. Worse than she imagined. Tanner hadn't just been hiding a few investment losses. His entire firm, the shiny crypto startup he paraded like a crown jewel, was a debt-riddled shell built on margin loans, high-risk bets, and more smoke than fire. The house. The watches, the $30,000 engagement ring, most of it leveraged. The wedding funded partly with money borrowed from a venture partner named Mr. Sterling, who was now demanding repayment. Or else. Claire screamed. She called him a liar. He told her she was too dramatic. She told him he disgusted her. He told her, "You won't do better than me." She packed a single duffel bag and left the suite at 3:12 a.m. By sunrise, she was back at our parents' house, curled up in her childhood bed, sobbing into a pillow I picked out for her in 2004. I didn't know any of this. While she unraveled, I was at the waterfall. Kai had taken a group of us on a morning hike to a hidden pool deep in the forest. We sat on mossy rocks and let the mist cool our faces. Someone played a handpan. I closed my eyes and felt my breath match the sound of moving water. And while I felt peace for the first time in years, Claire was surrounded by the wreckage of everything she thought would make her whole. Later that afternoon, Darlene Tanner's mother arrived at my parents' house. She came wearing pearls and a look that said damage control louder than words ever could. She didn't come to apologize. She came to negotiate. "These things happen," she reportedly said. "Financial matters can be resolved. What matters is appearances. We can't let this spiral." Claire, through tears, told her to get out. My parents finally painfully took Claire's side. Dad, who had once bragged about Tanner's LinkedIn profile at Thanksgiving, was livid. He told Claire he felt ashamed that he hadn't seen through it sooner. Mom, always so cautious with confrontation, held Claire for hours, whispering, "I'm so sorry we didn't protect you." But even then, even in the pit of their shared crisis, they all noticed something was missing. Me. They'd been texting, calling, emailing. At one point, my mom even tried reaching the lodge, directly leaving a voicemail with a soft, panicked plea. "If you see this, please tell Brooke to call home. It's important." I didn't get the message. I was still walking trails, learning to make tamarindo candies from scratch, sketching dragonflies in the margins of my journal, writing things like, What if being the responsible one was a trap they never meant to set? Why is silence more healing than an apology? That evening, I joined the meditation again. Kai led us in a practice about impermanence. Nothing fixed is real, he said. Everything changes. That's the truth. And yet, we cling. I cried. Not because I missed the wedding, but because for the first time, I didn't. Back home, Claire was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the dress she'd never wear. Thousands of dollars of fabric stitched into the fantasy of a life she almost gave everything for. She looked at Mom and whispered, Brooke was right. She saw him clearly, and I didn't want to hear it. Mom started to sob. We should have listened to her. We all should have. But they didn't. Not when it mattered. And now, I was gone unreachable, somewhere in the canopy, letting go of them all one breath at a time. The night of Claire's would-be rehearsal dinner, I fell asleep under a sky so crowded with stars, it looked like someone had spilled sugar across velvet. There was no noise, no screens, no pull of expectation. Just the rustle of leaves, the low groan of howler monkeys in the distance, and the rhythmic thud of my own heart, learning how to beat for no one else. I had no idea that back in Seattle, my family was unraveling. I had no idea that my parents had each tried calling me 5 times that day, or that Claire had sobbed into my mother's chest repeating, I pushed her away. And now, I don't know how to get her back. I didn't know because I wasn't looking. I wasn't checking. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty about it. Earlier that morning, I joined Kai for a private yoga session. He said I moved like someone carrying a suitcase made of memories. Heavy shoulders, he noted gently. That's where the family tension lives. I laughed. Then I cried, right there on a rubber mat under the trees. I told him I'd always been the person who showed up, the one who picked up the pieces, made the calls, covered the rent, booked the flights. I told him how I thought if I was just useful enough, predictable enough, then I'd finally be unforgettable. He smiled, handed me a piece of fruit, and said, The jungle forgets nothing. It remembers every leaf, even the ones that fall silently. That afternoon, I hiked with Maya and Joe to a cliffside viewpoint. From there, we could see miles of cloud forest spilling toward the Pacific like waves frozen mid-motion. I told them I was thinking of extending my stay. They cheered and hugged me like I'd just announced a promotion. And in a way I had. I was promoting myself. From second-tier daughter. From wedding punchline. From fixer-in-chief. That night after dinner, grilled vegetables, tamarind sauce wine, that tasted like red clay and oranges, we all gathered by the fire pit outside the main lodge. Someone passed around mugs of cinnamon tea. Someone else began strumming a ukulele. We didn't sing. We just listened, breathing in the soft rhythm of a night where no one asked me to be anything. When I returned to my bungalow, I reached for my journal again. My entries had shifted. At first, they were confessions. Then they became questions. Now they were declarations. I am not responsible for how others feel about the boundaries I set. I am not the sum of the roles I was assigned. I am not attending her wedding, and I am still whole. I closed the notebook, climbed into bed, pulled the mosquito net around me like a curtain between acts, and I slept. Deeply, fully. While 500 miles away, the stage burned. Claire had officially canceled the wedding that morning. The planner cried. The guests gasped. Hotel reservations evaporated. Darlene tried to spin the narrative, telling her social circle that Claire was emotionally overwhelmed and that the wedding would be postponed. But no one believed it. The truth always has sharper edges. Tanner didn't go quietly either. He showed up at my parents' house that afternoon, red-faced, demanding to talk it out. When Claire refused to come downstairs, he threatened legal action. He even said he'd bill the family for half the wedding. My dad, usually calm, composed, stood his ground for the first time in years. "You speak to my daughter that way again, and you'll be speaking to a cop." And for the first time, Claire felt protected by the very people who had often asked her to calm down in the past. But still, I wasn't there. I wasn't answering. My phone, deep in the lodge safe, sat in the dark like a time capsule from another life, blinking silently as the world I'd left behind tried with increasing desperation to pull me back in. Back in Costa Rica, the following morning began like all the others. Mist, coffee, the gentle thunder of the canopy. I joined a small tour that day, led by a local guide named Santiago. He wore a faded ball cap and walked with a slight limp from an old climbing injury. He told stories in a slow, steady voice about the plants that heal, the trees that communicate, the bats that sleep beneath banana leaves. At one point, he turned to us and said, "In the forest, everything is in balance. If one tree grows too fast and blocks the light, the others won't rise. That tree dies young." And for some reason, I thought of Claire, of all the attention, the spotlight, the constant crash of being too much and yet never enough. And then I thought of me, always shrinking, always clearing the path for others to shine. What if the forest had been trying to teach me something all along? Later that evening, Kai offered a special meditation on release. "Tonight," he said, "let go of one thing you've been carrying for far too long." I sat cross-legged, hands resting on my knees, eyes closed. And I let go of the belief that if I left, the family would fall apart. Because here's the truth, they did fall apart, without me. And maybe that's what they needed. Maybe I needed it too. When I got back to my bungalow, the stars were out again. I lay on my back on the balcony floor, arms outstretched, the wood warm beneath me. And I whispered into the open sky, if they really need me, they'll have to meet me where I am now, not where they left me. I hadn't planned on turning my phone back on. Not that day. Not yet. But something about my last full morning in Monteverde felt unfinished. The kind of quiet before something shifts. Like the jungle was holding its breath, waiting. I made my coffee strong, half for the caffeine, half for the comfort. The kind of cup that warms your palms before it even hits your lips. I sat on my balcony watching hummingbirds dart between orchids, and I told myself I'd just check the time. That's all. Just the time. But when I pulled the small black device from the room safe, it felt heavier than I remembered. Like it had absorbed the weight of every voice I hadn't heard, every expectation I'd laid down and walked away from. I stared at the power button for a long time, and then with a slow breath, I pressed it. The screen blinked once, then again. Then it came alive, and with it, everything I'd shut out came roaring back in. The notifications hit like a tidal wave. 17 missed calls from Mom, 11 from Dad, 3 from Claire, 1 from Tanner. I didn't open that one. A text from Melissa that just read, "Girl, call me." Wedding imploded. Entire families looking for you. My chest tightened, not from guilt, but from something quieter, heavier, like grief wrapped in disbelief. I scrolled through the texts. They started calm. "Hope you're having a great trip. Just checking in." Then Claire called off the wedding. "Please call when you can." Then "Claire's been asking for you." She keeps saying you were right. She needs you. Then, please, Brooke, come home. And then finally, we're so sorry. We should have stood up for you. I locked the phone again, set it down on the nightstand, and I sat there for a while staring at it like it was a stranger who knew too much about me. Somewhere in my chest, an old reflex stirred, the one that had me packing bags at midnight, skipping work to clean up my sister's mess, dropping everything because someone else's emergency felt louder than my needs. But it didn't rise, not this time. I stood up, poured myself another cup of coffee. Then I texted my parents, just turned on my phone. I'm safe and well. Flight leaves tonight. I'll call when I get home. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no instant rescue. Because the old Brooke would have raced to the airport. She would have landed, breathless, bags in hand, ready to triage the emotional wreckage with a clipboard and a smile. But the woman I'd become over the past 10 days, she knew the difference between urgency and importance. And she knew without a doubt that she wasn't put on this earth to be her family's emotional FEMA team. That morning, I went to the meditation deck one last time. Kai saw me coming and nodded silently like he knew. The world will always call louder when you're quiet, he said. What do I do with all of it? I asked, motioning toward my chest, the guilt, the noise, the ghosts in my inbox. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, You respond. You don't react. It took me a second to realize what he meant. Reacting is instinct. Responding is a choice. That afternoon, I joined Maya and Joe by the pool. They'd extended their trip and were leaving the same day as me. Maya raised her sunglasses and asked, You turned your phone back on, didn't you? I smiled wryly. Was it that obvious? Joe snorted. You've got that, I just read 17 emotional novels in one sitting look. We laughed, but it was true. I told them softly, simply, that the wedding had been called off, that everything had fallen apart back home, that apparently now I was needed again. They didn't say, You have to go. They didn't say, Told you so. They just asked, What do you want to do? And for once I gave myself permission not to answer right away. That night, I packed my bag slowly, methodically, folded the clothes I barely wore, slid my journal between the pages of a book I never opened, pressed my palm flat against the railing of my balcony as if to say thank you to the place that had held me when no one else knew how. When the stars returned that night, I didn't feel alone. I felt rooted. I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I'll go home, but I'm not going back. When I landed at SeaTac the next morning, the clouds hung low, that familiar Pacific Northwest gray that always feels like a sigh you can't shake off. I moved slowly through the terminal. No one was waiting for me at arrivals, which was a relief. I wasn't ready for the emotional ambush, the watery eyes, the apologies that always arrive dressed like excuses. I took a taxi to my apartment. The driver didn't ask questions. I was grateful for the silence. When I got home, I dropped my bags, fed my neglected houseplants, and took the longest, hottest shower of my life. I didn't even unpack. I just crawled into bed with damp hair and slept for 13 straight hours. When I woke, it was still raining. Fitting. That afternoon, I called my parents. Mom answered on the first ring. Brooke. She breathed like she wasn't sure I was real. Are you home? I am. Just got in last night. I'm okay. Thank God. Sweetheart, we've been trying to reach you. Claire. She's not well. There it was, the unspoken pivot, the shift from you're missed to she needs you. I didn't take the bait. I'll come by tomorrow, I said. But first, I need to talk to both of you. Alone, before I see Claire. There was a pause, a beat of silence so long I thought the line dropped. Of course, Mom said finally, her voice cautious. The next day, I drove to the house I hadn't seen in months. The lawn looked the same, trimmed perfect, too neat to feel alive. The wreath on the door was still the same faux eucalyptus one from spring. It felt like time had stopped or refused to move without permission. Dad opened the door. He looked older, like the last 2 weeks had dragged more than just time across his face. He hugged me, not tight, just enough. Mom stood in the foyer behind him, wringing her hands like she didn't know what to do with them. "Claire's upstairs," she whispered. "She hasn't really left her room. She keeps asking for you." "Later," I said, gently but firmly. "We need to talk first." We sat in the living room, the same room where we opened Christmas presents, where Claire once cried after a breakup, and I sat quietly in the corner with a mug of tea no one remembered to refill. I looked at them, my parents, these people I loved, who I now knew had hurt me in 1,000 tiny ways they never named. "Before I see Claire," I began, "I need to say some things. Not to punish you, not to guilt trip, but because I can't go back to being the person you knew before I left." They both sat still, as if bracing for impact. "When she uninvited me from the wedding, I said, voice low but steady, I waited for one of you to say, 'That's not okay.' I waited for someone to step in." "You didn't. We didn't know what to do," Dad said quickly. "We were afraid of pushing her away. So instead, I interrupted you. Let her push me out." That landed. Mom's face crumpled. "We never meant to choose sides," she whispered. "But you did," I said. "Every time you said, 'It's her big day,' or 'Let's just keep the peace.' What you really said was, 'Her comfort matters more than your dignity.'" Tears welled in Mom's eyes. Dad looked at the floor. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said more softly. "But from now on, I have boundaries. If I'm going to be in this family, really in it, I can't be the one who always bends so no one else has to." They didn't argue. They just listened. For once, really listened. After a long silence, Dad cleared his throat. "You're right," he said. "We failed you. We saw you as strong and assumed you didn't need defending. Being strong doesn't mean I'm invisible," I replied. "We know that now," Mom said, voice trembling. "Too late, maybe. But we do." There it was. Not a fix, not a solution, but maybe the first brick of something new. After a while, I stood up. "I'm going upstairs to see her," I said. "But I'm not here to rescue her. I'm not here to hold everything together." "Understood," Dad said quietly. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a memory. Claire's laughter echoing from the hallway. Me knocking on her door after a fight, always the first to apologize. I knocked. "Not hungry?" Mom came the muffled response. "It's not Mom," I said softly. There was a pause, then the sound of shuffling blankets, feet hitting the floor. The door cracked open. Claire stood there in wrinkled pajamas, eyes swollen, face blotchy. For a moment, she looked 12 again. "You came," she whispered. "I did." She stared at me like I was a hallucination. Then with a strangled sob, she lunged forward, wrapping her arms around me. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want you to be right." We stood there, her arms around my waist, mine gently resting on her shoulders. "You hurt me," I said quietly. "I know. I warned you because I love you. And you turned that into sabotage." She pulled back, eyes glistening. "I was so afraid that if you were right, then I'd be a fool, and I didn't want to be a fool. So I made you the enemy." I nodded. That's what scared people do. She wiped her face, nodding through tears. I pushed you away. I humiliated you. I made you feel small. And after everything, you still came. I came, I said, because I'm not doing this out of obligation anymore. I came because I wanted to see if there's anything left between us worth rebuilding. Is there? I looked at her, really looked. That depends. Are you willing to stop making chaos and calling it passion? To stop expecting the world to cushion every fall you leap into blind? I want to try, she whispered. We sat together on the edge of her bed. No promises, no hugging it out montage. Just the quiet breath of two women sisters trying finally to see each other clearly. That night, as I drove home through the soft drizzle of a Seattle dusk, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. I hadn't fixed anyone. I hadn't cleaned anything up. I'd told the truth. Set the line, held the boundary, and it held. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner for the first time in my life. My apartment wasn't big. It barely had enough room for the folding table I borrowed from Melissa and the mismatched chairs I pulled from every corner. But it was mine. It smelled like cinnamon candles and roasted squash, not fear or obligation. And that made all the difference. My parents arrived first, holding a pecan pie and a bottle of wine. Mom looked around like she was trying to memorize every detail: the framed prints on the wall, the little handwritten menu I'd taped to the fridge. "This is lovely, sweetheart," she said, eyes already misty. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I said, and I meant it. Claire came a little later. She brought cranberry sauce and homemade cornbread muffins that were, to my surprise, actually good. She wore no makeup, just a soft sweater and jeans. No drama, no entrance, just presence. She hugged me gently at the door. "I'm really glad you invited me." "Me too." And I was. Not because I'd forgotten, but because we were finally building something real. Not perfect, not painless, but real. Joe and Maya flew in from Boston 2 days earlier. I insisted they join us for dinner. They were more than friends now. They were part of the story, the people who saw me when I didn't even know I was invisible. As we gathered around the crowded table, steam rising from every dish, laughter already bubbling from the corners, Dad raised his glass. "I just want to say," he began, voice thick with emotion, "this past year wasn't easy. We've faced some hard truths, made mistakes, but sitting here, I feel grateful for all of it, especially for the way this family is learning how to grow together." Claire reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Mom turned to me, eyes glassy. "And Brooke," she said, her voice cracking, "thank you for being brave enough to show us where we failed you, for not letting us pretend things were okay. You deserved better, and we're so proud of who you are." I nodded. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, I was, but because, for once, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything by breaking. After dinner, while everyone helped clear the table, Claire pulled me aside. "There's someone I want you to meet." I raised an eyebrow. "Relax," she laughed, not in a wedding kind of way. We stepped into the hallway, and she showed me a picture on her phone. A man, kind-looking, glasses slightly crooked, standing beside a classroom whiteboard. "His name's Daniel," she said. "He teaches environmental studies at the community college where I'm taking classes." "You're back in school, part-time," she said. "Sustainable design. I'm trying to build something of my own now. Not for show, just because it matters to me." I smiled. A real one, the kind that came from somewhere deep and steady. "I'd love to meet him," I said. Eventually she winked. "Not bringing him to Thanksgiving until I know he can handle you." We both laughed. And in that laugh, there was something that hadn't existed between us in years' ease. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the wine was gone, and everyone had drifted toward the living room for board games and pie, I stepped onto my balcony alone. The air was cool, sharp with pine and wood smoke. The city stretched out below me, messy, loud, alive. I thought of Monteverde, of Kai, of the balcony where I first whispered, "I'll go home, but I'm not going back." I didn't. I came home on my terms. I set boundaries and kept them. I listened, but didn't absorb. I stayed without shrinking. That was the real miracle. Not that the family had changed overnight. They hadn't. We still fumbled, said the wrong things, slipped into old roles sometimes. But now when it happened, I named it. Gently, directly, and they heard me. Not always perfectly, but finally, consistently. In therapy, Claire admitted she'd spent years fearing she couldn't measure up to me. I thought if I made enough noise, no one would notice I didn't know who I was. Our parents, to their credit, owned their part. We went to sessions as a family. We unpacked the dynamics, the labels, the way they assumed my strength meant I didn't need softness, the way they mistook Claire's chaos for character instead of distress. And I kept journaling, kept saying no when it mattered, kept choosing presence over performance. Healing isn't a destination. It's not something you unlock and keep forever. It's a daily decision to show up differently, to stay soft, even when it would be easier to go numb, to love without losing yourself. As I stood on that balcony, watching the faint glow of downtown shimmer like embers, I whispered one last thank you to the version of me who booked that trip, who said enough, who powered off her phone and trusted the world would still spin without her managing it. She saved us all in her quiet, rebellious way. And maybe that's what Thanksgiving is really for. Not perfection, not performance, but presence. And the courage to rebuild a table where everyone, including yourself, has a seat that's earned, not assumed.